All right, let's dive right into this explainer and look at one of the absolute most famous moments in sports history. Most of us probably have this triumphant, movie-like image in our heads, right? A lone American hero single-handedly destroying fascist ideology on the track. But as we explore the actual historical sources today, you're going to see that the real story is entirely different from the neatly packaged legend we've been handed down over the decades.
We all think we know the story of Jesse Owens in 1936. The established cultural myth tells us he went to Berlin, won 4 gold medals, completely infuriated Adolf Hitler, and then came home a universally celebrated American hero. But what actually happened when he stepped off that podium? Well, the real narrative is much darker, vastly more complex, and frankly, a lot more tragic than the feel-good myth we've all been taught.
Section 1. The Myth of 1936. Let's go ahead and deconstruct this famous legend that pretty much everyone just accepts as historical fact.
Okay, so there is a massive contrast between the widely accepted story and the actual historical consensus. Everyone knows the classic tale. Jesse Owens wins gold, and Hitler is just so incensed by a black man's victory that he literally storms out of the stadium to avoid shaking his hand. Well, surprise, according to historians, the newspapers completely made up that specific story. The facts are actually pretty straightforward. Hitler didn't congratulate Owens, sure, but on that day, he didn't congratulate anybody else either, not even the German athletes. After the first day of competition, the Olympic Committee basically told Hitler, look, to maintain Olympic neutrality, you have to congratulate everyone or no one. Hitler chose no one. Actually, scratch that. Owens himself initially tried to tell reporters the Snub story wasn't true before he just kind of gave up and went along with it because people simply wouldn't stop asking.
Now here is the real twist. A snub did actually occur, but it was directed at a completely different athlete, Cornelius Johnson. And this happened on the very first day of the Games, right before the Olympic Committee intervened. Just before Johnson was about to be decorated, Hitler just up and left the stadium. A Nazi spokesman tried to claim it was a pre-scheduled departure, but yeah, historians note that absolutely nobody bought that excuse.
And this brings us to another huge misconception about the Games. You'd probably assume the German audience was incredibly hostile to Owens, right? I mean, before the Games, his own coach even warned him to just keep his head down and ignore the insults from the stands. But despite the incredibly sinister, racist agenda of the Nazi regime, the German audience actually loved him. He captured the imagination of the crowd so completely that they gave him these massive, ear-shattering ovations. Owens later recalled that Berlin gave him the greatest ovations of his entire career. Wild, isn't it?
Section 2. The real presidential snub. Because if Hitler wasn't the one who ultimately snubbed Owens, we have to look a lot closer to home to find out who actually did.
Just listen to Owens' own powerful words here. This completely flips the script on who delivered the most painful insult of 1936. Owens flat out stated that the leader of his own country was the one who ignored him. He pointed out that while the public was totally obsessed with this fake Hitler snub, his own president was supposedly too busy to even acknowledge a historic 4 gold medal achievement. It is just a staggering reality. While Jesse Owens was being championed all over the globe as this ultimate symbol of American triumph over fascism, his own government refused to formally acknowledge him. He gets home and crickets. No telegram of congratulations. No invitation to the White House from President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The man who supposedly proved the superiority of American democracy on the world stage was essentially rendered invisible by his own nation's leader.
And you really have to connect this to the broader context of America in 1936. We can't forget that Owens was part of a group of 18 African-American athletes who competed in Berlin. They went over there, defied Nazi supremacy, won hearts and medals, only to return right back to systemic Jim Crow racism at home. The everyday prejudices they faced in the United States certainly didn't just magically disappear because they were wearing gold medals.
Section 3. Banned from the track. Let's see how this builds into the outright exploitation of a national hero by the very American sports establishment he represented.
It is honestly shocking how quickly the sports authorities turned on their absolute biggest star. Just think about how fast this unfolded. The track and field events wrap up on August 9th. Literally the very next day, Avery Brundage and the American Athletic Union force Owens and the team onto this grueling European exhibition tour. Why? Simple, to make money for the AAU. Owens was just utterly exhausted. So by mid-August, after running in London, he and his coach finally put their foot down. They refused to board a flight to Sweden for yet another event and opted to take a boat home instead. Brundage's response? Swift and brutal. He permanently suspended Owens from all amateur athletic competition.
11 pounds.
That is the alarming amount of weight Jesse Owens lost in just a matter of days on this forced tour. The conditions were absolutely punishing. Picture this. Right after competing in Berlin, he's rushed to Cologne, then travels completely alone to Prague, where his plane gets delayed, and a random fellow passenger actually has to buy him a sandwich because he didn't have a dime on him. He arrives in Prague, immediately races, flies to Bochum the next day, races again, and then travels to England, arriving way past midnight, only to be forced to sleep in an empty airport hangar. Owens totally saw through the sheer exploitation taking place. Just read his own words. He literally calls the track business a racket. The AAU was taking a massive cut. In Cologne, they negotiated an increase to take 15% of the gate receipts just because Owens was running. Meanwhile, Owens and his teammates were so broke they couldn't even afford to buy basic souvenirs from their trip. He's generating all this incredible wealth for the administrators, but the second he asks for a little basic rest, banned.
Section 4. The tragic aftermath. Now we have to look at what happens when a suspended hero tries to survive in a deeply segregated society.
It is wild how quickly things went downhill. It took less than 3 years for the greatest athlete in the world to fall from winning 4 Olympic gold medals to facing total financial ruin. Because he was stripped of his amateur status by Brundage, Owens' collegiate career at Ohio State was prematurely over. By December of that exact same year, 1936, he was down in Havana, Cuba, running a 100-yard dash against a horse just to earn a living. And by May of 1939, his dry cleaning business had collapsed and he was filing for bankruptcy.
This quote just strikes right at the heart of the tragedy, doesn't it? It perfectly highlights the brutal economic reality he was dealing with. He was an uncompensated amateur who was entirely stripped of his athletic status. He had a wife and young kids to feed. People expected him to maintain this dignified, untouchable posture of an Olympic legend. But as he so plainly put it, you can't eat 4 gold medals. He had to take whatever endorsements and spectacles came his way just to survive. So literally just make ends meet, the fastest man in the world was degraded into becoming a sideshow attraction. He was racing some truly bizarre opponents: trains, cars, motorbikes, dogs, and horses. Like Julio Macaw, the horse he raced down in Cuba. He even raced against the heavyweight boxing champion Joe Louis. And get this, Owens actually had to purposely trip to let the slower fighter win. Owens admitted later that doing these races made him sick, that he felt like a total freak. But the AAU ban left him with no other path to make a living in athletics. This starkly highlights the painfully hypocritical double life he was forced to lead. Over abroad, he was a barrier-breaking hero, smashing world records and being cheered by tens of thousands in Berlin. But back in his own country, he faced systemic racism every day. At Ohio State University, despite his completely unrivaled talent, he was denied an athletic scholarship and forced to live off campus in segregated housing. Later in life, when he was traveling the U.S., he still had to wait outside in parked cars while white teammates picked up food from cafes that refused to serve black patrons.
And it's really important to note that people at the time saw exactly what was happening. As reported impartially by sources like the Daily Worker in 1936, contemporary journalists were quick to point out this glaring hypocrisy. They noted how the United States was, quite rightly, outraged at fascist ideology and Nazi racism overseas, yet completely tolerated Jim Crow segregation, the color line in Major League Baseball, and horrific systemic violence right at home. The treatment of Owens and other black athletes just laid this massive contradiction bare for the entire world to see.
So, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought based on the historical record. When the cheering stops and the games are officially over, how does a society truly treat the barrier-breaking heroes who challenged its deepest prejudices? The story of Jesse Owens isn't just a story about a fast runner defying a dictator. It's a mirror. It reflects how incredibly fast a society can discard a legend when they no longer serve a convenient feel-good narrative. Honestly, how far have we really come in honoring the athletes who sacrifice so much to carry the weight of our national ideals? Think about that one. And I really hope you decide to dive deeper into this fascinating, if totally heartbreaking history.